Welcome to Good Sex at NYU, a podcast about sex, relationships, health, and mental health, in a sex-positive space. So if you're looking for something serious, sometimes funny, and always sex-positive, then you're in the right place. I'm Danielle Elleman. I use she/her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of Sexual and Relationship Respect Services. This is Good Sex at NYU, your space for sex-positive conversations about relationships, sex, and well-being. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Good Sex at NYU. I'm Danielle Elleman. I'm your host. We're here today with Michele Canning. She is NYU's Assistant Athletic Director for Strategic Initiatives and Student Development, also former coach and soccer player. And we're here with Maddie Schier. She's a research coordinator and mental health counseling intern at Weill Cornell Hospital and a former NYU soccer player. And then we're here with Serenity McNair, NYU sophomore liberal studies student and current NYU women's basketball player. And I might add, reigning champs for the NCAA Division III. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're here today to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a student athlete. And this is personal to me because I grew up playing volleyball and basketball, and I decided not to go to college and play sports. I always live with a little bit of regret, so I love that y'all are here to get to tell me what it's like if I had chosen that path. But before we get into some of the questions, I wonder if you can share with me just like a little bit about your background, like maybe where you came from and what drew you to being part of like the sports and athletic environment. Anyone want to go first?
I can start.
Excellent.
So I played soccer since I was very little, and was just drawn to the competitiveness, the community, and played at NYU from 2015 to 2019, and have made lifelong friends through the program, and just really enjoyed the competitiveness.
So I've been playing basketball for a very long time. As soon as I started walking, my dad put a basketball in my hands, and I just fell in love with the sport, played it all throughout elementary school, middle school, high school, obviously. Then the recruitment process happened, and then NYU started looking at me, and I was like, this is, the best of both worlds, academically, athletically, because they were on a crazy run when they started recruiting me, and that crazy run is still going on right now. So joined a great program for sure, and like Maddie said, I've made some of my lifelong friends for sure on the team.
And last but not least,
I grew up in Philadelphia, and I lived in a city neighborhood, and the field was directly across the street, the soccer field, so I could see the field from my house. Mm-hmm. And my mom is from a huge family. My aunt is only 10 years older than me. So she was like my first intramural soccer coach. And I had tried other things like dance and Girl Scouts, and none of them stuck, but soccer was immediate. So I grew up playing soccer. I went to high school, specifically a school like that was soccer heavy. We won the state championship there. It was only the second ever girls state championship in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Because girls sports, I was at the beginning of girls sports exploding. And then I got recruited, and I chose Seton Hall, where I was a member of the first ever women's soccer recruiting class. Mm-hmm. So the first ever program. And then after college, I just was figuring out what the best fit was for me. And I thought about becoming a professor, but I liked the idea of staying in athletics. So I became a coach, and I coached for a very long time, over 20 years. And now I have shifted into being an athletic director.
Yeah, that's great. I'm seeing myself in some of those conversations or some of those intros, just because, I still play volleyball. It's still where I got my community. And so I'm wondering if you all can tell me maybe a little bit about some of the benefits that you see in being part of the athletic community, and maybe what some of the challenges have been for you all, or what you see in students as well.
I feel like basketball has been a really big part of my community, being at NYU specifically, because NYU is obviously not your traditional school with a traditional campus, and it can be harder to build certain relationships and connections across the entire city. So I feel like basketball has definitely helped me to make sure I have like at least 15 plus people who I know have my back. We call ourselves the sisterhood, and I know that I can trust those people, to get us through every single day, because our practices are hard. Like our preseason, regular, everything is hard. And it should be because of all the success that we're having. But it gets to a point where it's like, wow, I don't know if I can do this today or tomorrow or the day after that. But then, like, those people help pull you out of whatever type of feelings you're having, which I'm sure spans across all athletics, because no sport is easy, regardless of what the outcome is looking like record-wise from year to year. So I feel like community-wise has definitely been, like, a blessing for me to have those people I know I can rely on.
Yeah, and sort of building on that, I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed, especially transitioning out of athletics and now into the next chapter of my life, is how much resilience you build through athletics. And something that I hear over and over is that sports is a microcosm of the rest of life and society, and you have to deal with adversity and challenge and loss in all of these different areas and build coping skills and resilience. And so athletics really helps with that.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to echo the built-in social network and also built-in support network, because I am someone who has very introverted personality. And so then when I go into new spaces, because I have an athletics background, it's like, oh, I could go to college, I already have a team. Or I'm going to graduate school, I'm going to go introduce myself to the head coach and volunteer with the team and meet people in a totally new environment. And the same even now makes it really easy when you're networking or talking to other professionals and, oh, I played soccer in college. And it's like, oh, great, I played baseball. And then you start chatting, and it's just such an easy way in with a shared identity. And then that network also can be a support network of alums and, you know, mental health professionals and all of these other things, academic advisors, all these other networks that you get because you're an athlete.
Yeah. When I heard a lot of the benefits, what are some of the challenges? Maybe I also heard the really challenging practices.
Yeah.
But are there some other challenges that, you know, come to mind when you think about being part of an athletic community?
I mean, I feel like there's discomfort, not necessarily like bad discomfort, but like challenging discomfort when, especially being a part of such a high achieving program, everyone is all succeeding at a high level, like all of the time. And when you have days where you may underperform or have days where you didn't do as well as you know you could have done, or there was a really hard conditioning test for you to get through or something like that, then it's more difficult when everyone else is achieving what you feel like you can't. But then at the same time, it works as a motivation factor, and gets you to push yourself to that next level, because everyone here was the best or one of the best on their teams before this. So that you get here, it's like, okay, you have to adjust and adapt to what being on par looks like here. So I feel like that's probably the hardest part, is just, you know, pushing yourself to a higher level that you feel like you may not be able to achieve. But then once you get there, you're like, I'm here for a reason. I deserve to be here with everyone else. So it feels uncomfortable in the moment, but I think all in all, it's very beneficial.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think sort of on the flip side of what I said before, the resilience is almost like resilience to a fault at some points. Of like, that's where perfectionism can come in. Also, I think just the standard that a lot of athletes are held to of not being weak, which includes not being mentally weak. So I think there's a lot of stigma around asking for help if you are struggling, and just not performing to very high standards all the time.
Yeah, and I think being part of a team as well, we're talking about how much a community and sport network it is, but I have seen over the years certain players who are so invested in those relationships, there can be an added layer of pressure then, because you feel pressure to not let other people down. So you're not just not letting yourself down if you make a mistake or if you're not developing in the way that you think you should. I have seen players take on the burden of feeling like they're letting their whole team down, or they're letting their family down. And it's not, so then the expectation isn't just your own, it's everyone around you. And like making sure you keep emphasizing the supportive environment, not overly competitive or overly critical, where that could really tank a player's confidence.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, like, how much does the coach matter? Because I know when I was growing up, I had a terrible coach when I was in high school basketball, and it so had an impact on me. I wanted to quit. I was like, this isn't worth it. So I'm wondering if you can talk, a little bit about like the culture of the team environment and the impact that has on athletes.
I can start. In a lot of research from like systems theory, there's so many different levels of systems that can be at play and have an effects on people's mental health and well-being. And one of those is interactions with coaches and players, also coaches' interactions with other immediate people around players, like coaches interacting with parents. So I think all of that has a huge effect on players. I think talking about what I mentioned before, stigma, I think coaches can either have a really positive effect on stigma or perpetuate the stigma. So I think it can really be top down, and coaches can sort of set the tone for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely, actually, because I've had my fair share of coaches. It's like, okay, I really enjoyed playing for you, and then it's like, I could not wait for our season to be over. Between the two, it's a spectrum. You're not going to have, polar opposites most of the time. You're going to have parts that you really like about your coach and parts that you don't really like about your coach. But I think it's important that the good outweighs the bad, obviously, to really influence a positive experience.
As a former coach, and a lot of people still call me coach, I feel like that's another identity that you don't really ever lose. It stays with you. I think it's so difficult. It's such a challenging job. And I think there are a lot of times where people don't try to take the perspective of where the coach is coming from, too. The coach is trying to meet the needs of so many stakeholders, the players, their institution, their athletic director, the parents, and the alumni, boosters. There are so many competing stakeholders. And you have to work really hard to keep reframing, to keep your focus on the students and their development. And there's so much research now, in my opinion, out there about process. Is the student developing? What are the students' goals? What is their individual capacity, not comparison? But yeah, I think the narrative across sports culture hasn't caught up with that. So a coach might be so trying to focus on process with each individual player and trying to make sure that player is maximizing their potential and how they fit into the group. But then outside of that enclosed environment, all anyone wants to talk about is if you won or not. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, great. All the research is over on this side, but the only thing you want to talk about over here is outcome. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of coaches love when they get the opportunity to talk about the process and the growth. And for a lot of coaches, I think that's their favorite moments, the time they get to spend with the players, watching them grow and what they can accomplish and who they can become after they graduate.
Well, yeah, you see that a lot in like the broader like sports world. Like as soon as I'm not super into football, but I've just heard a bunch of like football coaches like being fired because they didn't have the winning record. There's a lot of pressure that gets placed on the coach. I know I'm a New York Liberty fan, and our coach got fired because she didn't get him to the playoffs, further in the playoffs, and she didn't win back-to-back. And there's a lot of pressure just to win. How does that trickle down as like players? Like, do you feel that?
I would say I definitely do, but we're on a crazy winning streak right now, so it's to be expected to have a lot of pressure on it, I guess. Obviously, we walk into practice every day, and it's like you have a target on your back. Like, we got torn into yesterday at practice, and, But like I said, the UAA we have targets on our backs now because we have won over 75 games in a row from season to season, and that's something to, be proud about, sure, but definitely with each game we win, it becomes more pressure. Like, more pressure is put on to how we perform in our next game. So I feel like we definitely feel that we're on this winning streak, but my coach is very intentional about making sure we don't put too much weight on it. Like, yes, you've won all this, but that doesn't mean that you can't lose the next one. So I definitely do feel like there is a lot of pressure on winning, specifically in my program, because if or when we lose, I feel like it's going to definitely change how we kind of identify, just shake up our identity a little bit. Obviously, we'll still have the same principles and work ethic and everything else, but I don't know how anyone's going to react if we lose, honestly. So there's a lot of pressure on it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thinking back to systems theory, coaches are just interacting within the broader system of the NCAA and the environment and the current culture that's happening, and that comes with its own pressures for coaches. And also, too, many coaches were players themselves, and the pressure that they felt as players is just passed down intergenerationally from coach to player, and it keeps going.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, and maybe you, Serenity, might be able to speak to this more, but how does that come across when you have this, I think it's relatively new, I don't know, to be honest with you, because I'm not in the world as much, but where you have the transfer portal. Like, because there is such a, like, oh, I can transfer into this school and we can, like, improve our record, or, like, there's a difference from when I was in college. Like, you didn't have access to that. Does that change the dynamics of the team, or?
Yeah, I would say so. The transfer portal really took off, I think, around COVID, if I'm not mistaken. So I was just going into high school, so I wasn't really thinking about it much. But then it did end up trickling down and affecting my recruitment process, because instead of bringing in freshmen, people were bringing in people from the portal. And it was like, why not bring in somebody who already has that experience, who can, fill that spot. So it definitely did take a toll on a lot of stuff when it first started blowing up. And it's still very prevalent right now. And I think it definitely does play a role. We've had grad transfers the last 2 years, and we've won the national championship the last 2 years. So I feel like that plays a big role in our team, and bringing in someone with that experience and bringing in someone who can immediately produce for you. And ultimately, it does end up affecting the younger ones who were brought in, just because you've been put behind all the upperclassmen who you were already coming in behind, and then the transfers on top of that. But that's not really important when the bigger picture is the whole team and how the whole team is performing. So I feel like the transfer portal is definitely a big deal, especially in the basketball world. I don't really know about the soccer world much.
And I think in all of the sports.
Yeah, that's what I would assume. Because it's kind of like a cheat code. Like, you have everyone who you recruited, and then also you can bring people with experience and so much know-how on certain different, aspects. So, yeah.
I'm also curious as to how social media and the media in general play a role in athletics. I don't know how it specifically impacts athletics, but I know how it impacts young people in general. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about, like, how that might be maybe more pressure or more intensity around, competition. Any thoughts around how that shows up in athletics?
I can start off. I would say social media is a very big part. My generation is social media heads. Like, we have to be on social media for a lot of our day, and a lot of how we are as people is dictated by how much time we spend on social media, what's on our feeds, what's recommended for us, what we feed our brains every single day is just social media. And that can be very influential, both in a positive and a negative way, depending on what you're feeding your brain. But for us, like I said, we kind of got torn into yesterday at practice, and one thing that came up was the tweets that were put out about us after our last game. We did win by 30. However, we were supposed to win by more, I guess, depending on the team. And it was like a big deal. It was like, so proud of my girls. We were the first to beat NYU in a singular quarter, and we only lost by 30. It's just crazy, like crazy perspective change, I guess, because if I'm looking at somebody else who lost by 30, I'm like, wow, it was a tough game, huh? And then, they tweet about it, and it's like, but we did well, though, because it could have been by a lot more. And obviously, like, we didn't really know about that as the players, but my coach does take stuff personally and likes to put a little bit of fire up under us, because sometimes it's hard to keep that fire when you've won so many games. It just feels like routine to just go through every game day, I guess. So with that being out there and with other people seeing it and dictating, like, oh, wow, this might be like the time to attack NYU and, like, hit them while they're weak, but we're not weak. We just, we won by 30. But, so I think social media definitely plays a big part in kind of instigating stuff that shouldn't be instigated. Yeah. I feel like.
Yeah. I think also just putting more pressure on.
Yeah.
More pressure to, like, win and keep up that winning streak, or to keep, looking a certain way, or, like, the standard that you're having to continue to follow. So thinking about all of the things, I know we talked a lot about challenges, but how does this impact like your academics and being able to like balance things? But also I'm thinking with that pressure and that stress, like the mental health component that comes up in all of this, the anxiety, well, I have to perform well, I have to, not only win, but also I have to like keep up my grades and things like that. So can you guys speak to that issue at all?
Yeah, go ahead, Schier.
I was just going to say, I think with social media, it just gives another tangible thing that athletes are held to. And with athletes getting featured on social media, and it just gives another standard for athletes to try and meet, and a way that they could potentially fail. And so I think that's just where a lot of the perfectionism can come in, and a lot of like black and white thinking. And yeah, basically just having very high standards that they have to meet. And if they don't meet those, then it's failing.
And it's so visible. What athletes do is already visible. So for example, to go back to the coaching, like in a coaching role, how you are performing is anyone could click on a website and look how you're performing. That is not really normal in most other professions. So everything the coach is doing is so visible, and it is the same for athletes. Everything they are doing is so visible, and then to add on promoting it and blasting it out everywhere on social media, it's a whole nother layer of something to be aware of or conscious of. And I was never a social media person. I am still not. And with the teams, we would we would take the opposite, forever. This is a closed group. This is a closed group. Whatever those people are saying is outside of our value system. It's outside of what is important to us. Unless it is a person who we actually really value their opinion, we're not even going to talk about what they say because it's not relevant. Because otherwise you're bombarded. You're just so bombarded. I can't even imagine. There's like bullying cases now. One of the main problems in the NCAA is dealing with is student athletes who are being bullied by fans and people gambling on their games. That is like what kind of pressure a young person is dealing with besides school and trying to win their game.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And when you think about the mental health components that might be coming up from the bullying or might be coming up for their perfectionism, do you feel like athletes are less likely to seek support? Because I heard that like sometimes like they're less likely to ask for help because you have to be perfect. And so I'm wondering if you can maybe speak a little bit more about that side of things.
Yeah, I think there's so much of a conversation or just a unspoken feeling of needing to be strong and not mentally weak. So I think that is a barrier to asking for help. With a lot of the work that I do, we also talk about just how this period of emerging adulthood, there's so many other expectations and milestones that young adults are expected to face. And like some of those things are developing self-identity and meeting educational and vocational goals. And I think there's already just a feeling of needing to achieve so many things at one time, and a lot of feelings of being left behind. And I think social media just exacerbates all of that. Plus being an athlete on top of all of that exacerbates everything. So it's already a really difficult time period that just is made even more difficult.
I feel like as an athlete also, we can have the detrimental mindset of how we do one thing is how we do all things. So as you are going through a very tough practice and it's like you can get through this last sprint or you're hurt and you can still play, like I can push through is kind of the mindset that, and I feel like being physically hurt and being mentally hurt are two completely different things that need to be handled in very different ways. Obviously, I'm sure you've played through injury. I'm sure you played through injury. Your body's not going to feel good when you do stuff every single day for your sport and you play hard games and practice even harder. Whatever you may be doing, you're going to be in pain. It's just like I can get through this. Like I love the sport. I love what I do. I can push through so that I can help my team to win or help give us the best shot to do so. And then mentally, once you develop that I can push through mindset, it's not very healthy. in fact, it's unhealthy, and it's probably the worst thing you could do is just be like, I'm fine, and just brush it off. Because it is important to talk. And my team specifically, we do have a lot of perfectionists and a lot of people with anxiety and just things that we tend not to talk about on the team, but stuff has been brought up to my coach. So we've recently started, or last year we started working with Ari Miller, who is our mental coach. I'm sure you've heard of Ari. Yeah, he works with a few different teams throughout athletics, which I think is wonderful because it doesn't have the sometimes scary name of therapist. That can be a scary concept for a lot of people, a lot of athletes specifically, because like, I don't need help with this, but then you start talking, you start doing exercises, and it does end up helping you with the name mental coach, because we've never minded having the name coach attached to anything that's here to help us. I'm here to help us get better, because the mental connection with your physical performance is so strong, and it's not talked about as much as it should be. It's talked about a lot more now than I feel like ever, which is a beautiful thing to recognize and to notice, because it does affect performance heavily. And once you start to work with people who specialize in this, I feel like it can only help the athlete perform at their highest level.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of the culture to access the resources. So now that your team is accessing that resource, because the resources do exist, but there for sure is the element of don't ask for help or not knowing when to ask. Because like with athletes, there's a lot of figure it out for yourself mentality, figure it out if you're in a team, but still figure it out. And so then helping athletes understand the difference between like, is this something that is minor? And in 1 week, I have, a miniest like broken something on my toe, which is like not that painful and I can play through that. Or do I have a broken arm? We had a goalkeeper at Seton Hall like in the early 2000s who had a broken arm and played the whole season with a broken arm and never told anyone that she broke her arm.
Oh, wow.
And so it is like, okay, where is the line here between what is something that is, I should be resilient and I should be building my resilience skills and I can manage this. And okay, this is where it's okay. When do I know I need to ask for help?
Yeah. And I think that's probably, and this is as a mental health provider, thinking that that's also where your family culture, where your past coach history culture comes into play. I mean, the broader culture, I think, is a little bit more open to mental health services, but I still think within like certain contexts and certain, communities, there is still stigma with connecting to a therapist versus like maybe a coach. So I like that you sort of framed it in that way. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of like challenges when it comes to, being an athlete, including like we see in our service, folks with like, they're performing at such high level, but they have really low confidence, or they have difficulty regulating emotion, or there's some eating disorders that come up when it comes to like, depending on your sport, I'm thinking wrestling, that's just the first one, like, because you have to weigh in, but I mean, I'm sure there's other sports like swimming or other things where you have to, monitor your diet a lot, and that's more pressure, but I'm sure that's, true for things that I'm not even thinking of right now. But how do you approach that, like when you're seeing people who are really struggling with some of those things? Do you reach out to them as a teammate? Would you connect them to services? Like, how do you manage when you see people in athletics struggling with some of these things?
I think two of the biggest things that we always talk about is just always ask. Like, research shows that talking about it or asking people if they're struggling, or even talking about suicidal thoughts, anything like that, it doesn't make it worse, and it doesn't make people have more severe symptoms. So just talking about it, I think, helps break the stigma, and also gives people a space to feel more comfortable talking about it. And then we also talk about validation a lot, which is so overlooked a lot of the times because it seems so simple, but just validating that it's really hard, and that it's everybody struggling and it's okay to struggle is so helpful.
I agree with that 100%. I think that's been a really big thing for me this year, in relation to our freshman class, because my freshman year was pretty rough, but I wanted to make sure that the freshman class coming in this year didn't feel that way. I wanted to make sure they felt supported in the best way possible. And I feel like validation has been huge in that. Like, if they're struggling, they try to keep a brave face and, you know, stay strong. And I'm like, okay, I understand that, you know, this is how you want to present to everybody else. But on a real person-to-person level, I can understand this is hard. Like, it is difficult. And it gets more difficult for us every year because we won't lose. So it's like more, you know, more, just so much more pressure from year to year. And that's difficult coming in at 17, 18 years old to handle 1000%. And we have freshmen who are in the rotation heavily. So I know it's difficult for them, you know, a lot of pressure. So making sure that they feel validated, and also if they are struggling in one thing, to bring up what they are not struggling in, what they're succeeding in, and kind of helping them to see that balance, that just because this isn't your strongest point doesn't mean you aren't strong at all. So I feel like that's very important.
And we, within athletics, being from an administrator's perspective now, we have connection to NYU Wellbeing. So our coaches and all of our varsity performance staff receive mental health training, awareness training of like signs of what to look for student athletes. It's so that all of our staff that has direct contact with students knows when to recognize like major signs and how to point them in the right direction of where the actual help is for them.
Yeah, and I know we have a specific counselor who works in athletics, Nina Matthew. She's great, and she has like a workshop that touches on some of these elements when it comes to like anxiety management, emotion regulation, and building confidence. So we do have like supports. I mean, you might also, you know, get her in individual counseling, but we have a ton of other counselors too that will work with students based on like their specific need. And like if someone is struggling with, you know, disordered or negative eating patterns, like we have a whole team for that. Or if there's trauma that's there, we have a whole team for that too. So lots of good resources that we'll touch upon a little bit later as well. But I'm wondering, can you all talk a little bit more about just what it means to like have a lot of pressure from like the academic side? Because I feel like it's a lot to be traveling to different places. I don't know how far y'all go out, you know, like if it's within the same day or if like you're traveling overnight, like how to navigate that with like professors and maintaining your academics while you're also a student. What does that look like?
We have support that I am really proud of at NYU at the Division III level, because we have an Office of Student Athlete Excellence, which is an office which provides both academic, sport, and leadership skills training. And so all of our student athletes have access to that office, which in when students are looking at NYU, you know, we're really clear about making sure that students know they have this extra support, because when you're navigating an institution in the middle of New York, which you have already referenced, there's like so many things with just traveling around campus. Forget about traveling and play U Chicago. Right. So we have that office that helps with that, and then we do a survey of all student athletes, all 500 student athletes, and we ask questions about, you know, can they find the resources? Do they know they exist? How do you feel about your time management? So we have the 5 fall sports back, and we have 95% of the student athletes feel confident in their time management. And then we ask them to give examples of how are you managing your time. So there's a lot of like Google Calendar. I block my schedule opposite of practice so that I know if I have practice at night, I have to do my work in the morning. But then if you're on a different team, I know I have to do my work at night because I practice in the morning. So there are a lot of students who are using a lot of tools, and maybe you can share some of the tools that you have used. Or
it was like so long ago. I was an athlete, but I just remember doing like Google Calendar as well. Lots of and I think this is where you have to be aware of yourself too, and like when the perfectionism is coming in, and if there are things that you actually have to be doing, or if you're like over preparing because of anxiety and things like that. But just using your time productively, like using time on the bus to do schoolwork and study, things like that. I think those were some of the biggest things I learned.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I probably have one of the easier experiences with this student athlete thing, especially being at NYU, because I know soccer has to travel to where they practice, where they play. Softball has to travel to where they we're at Paulson, so we have it easy in that sense. Like, we could just walk to practice. It's not really out of, or maybe a quick subway ride for me because I live uptown, but still it's not crazy inconvenient compared to the rest of the sports. So in that instance, I would say it's easier, because even just getting around campus can, like Michele said, be a journey for sure. But like these UAA weekends are tough, with when you leave on Thursday and you don't come back until Sunday night, and you have to get your work for your Thursday classes, your Friday classes. You might have an exam on Monday that you have, it's a lot. But I think that also goes back to the community piece, because I have people on my team who are pre-med, pre-health, and that's difficult being on an athletics team that demands so much of your time. So just seeing your teammates doing it, I also feel like helps out a lot, because like, okay, they're doing it. I know I can do it. We might have 2 hours of downtime between pregame meal and when we actually leave for the game. You have to stay disciplined, and you have to do your work during that time, even if you do feel like you want a nap before the game or something like that. It's difficult, but you know what you have to do. So I feel like time management becomes a very big thing in that sense, and also just becoming a more disciplined person and pushing yourself off the court, off the field is a thing as well, academically.
Yeah. Well, I'm also wondering, like, when do you fit in any kind of fun?
Exactly. That's a great question.
Because I'm hearing, like, discipline, and I'm hearing, oh, we got to, like, push ourselves, like, in the, practice setting, and then we go to games. And I'm like, as athletes, like, I know, like, the sport is fun, maybe when you're actually playing, once you get there. But, like, when is there time to have a social life and to have, like, an active, like, engagement with your community? It could be your basketball team, or it could be like folks in other athletic areas, or just in, you're in New York City, so like getting to enjoy some of that. Like, was that a challenge for you back in your day?
Yeah, that was something that I feel like I almost had to retrain my brain afterwards. And transitioning out of sports, I realized how important it is to have other identities outside of athletics that you really value. And that way it's so much easier to place importance and dedicate time to social life and other hobbies. And I also had to retrain my brain that you don't have to be productive all the time. And it's okay to rest.
I'm still trying to retrain that.
And that resting is just as productive as pushing yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I had to up my time management this year, because I was really into nothing but basketball last year, and that was all I really spent my time doing. But I had to be more intentional about getting my work done early, getting out of practice as soon as I can type deal, like getting clean and getting back home. And so I joined BLAC, which is the Black Latinx Athletic Coalition, and then I'm also in BSU, the Black Student Union. And then a few other clubs that I just kind of put myself out there just to see like if I can form another identity other than basketball player. Does it come up a lot that I am a basketball player in those scenarios? Yes, but at least I'm there and forming connections with other people. But also I have a great team, and all the time that we spend together is not like, oh, I'm tired of y'all. Like, now obviously you can't get to that point once you spend. Our season is long. Like, we start in September, we end in late March. It is a long season. It's essentially the whole school year. So it can get to a point where it's like, wow, I've been around y'all every day, 24/7. But our coaches did a great job recruiting people who mesh together so well that it doesn't even feel like we've been around each other as often as we have. And you obviously get a lot closer with each other. So, like, even after this, I'm going to go hang out with some of my teammates, and it's our off day, and we're doing it by choice. So I think that's also really important, that while we don't have a lot of time to go out and do stuff together, when we're around each other, we do still enjoy each other's time.
Yeah, I think that's great. I want to go back to the point that, Maddie, you made just about different identities and, what happens when a student athlete maybe injures themselves, or like when they do graduate and move out of the identity as athlete, like how do they manage that? Or how, like, again, you said fostering some of these other things. Are there other tips or things that you would suggest as, both you and Michele have transitioned out a little bit of that identity? Maybe you're still playing, I don't know. But any other tips that you have for that?
Yeah, I think building identities outside of sport is probably the most important one. I think also the one factor that can make it really, those transitions even more difficult is when you don't have control over them. Like if you didn't have control over your injury, and you had a forced retirement for that reason. So finding ways to have more control in your life that are healthy. And so that's being proactive, taking action, versus maybe falling into unhealthy ways of control. Like, I think that's where a lot of the disordered eating can sometimes come into play for athletes. That can often be a way to grasp at more control in your life. So finding control in more healthy ways, and building routine around that.
Yeah.
And I think some things as well are, one, the environment that you're in can help with this. So if you're set up where your coaching environment understands these transition moments are really difficult, or your sports performance environment understand that we could have supports built in place when someone is injured to make sure that they are being still looked after and they don't feel left out and they're not missing out on everything. And so the administration and the staff, I think, can help with that. And also, it is well documented now that these transitions are hard. So the transition from like when you ultimately retire, when you are graduating, if you're not becoming a professional, talking about athletes, like giving them a heads up. Some of them don't see it coming. Giving them a heads up, like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about what this is going to feel like? And giving them a heads up, the timeline is different. Some students feel it immediate. They're crying their eyes out. Like during the last game, I have had players crying their eyes out on the field during the last game while it's like competing, not before or after. And so you have that, but then you have some people where it won't hit them until the next season, months and months and months later, when they look on social media and they see their team practicing and they're not there anymore. So I think a good reflective question to ask is like, why was I an athlete? So it was like, oh, because I'm going to miss the competition, or I'm going to miss the exercise, or I'm going to miss being part of a group. And then how can I figure out that specific need to meet it in a different way?
Yeah. I really like that. So what's the underlying motivation? And then sort of how do I then get that in different ways? And maybe that means continuing to connect with, some form of athletic endeavor. Or maybe it means completely because you have an injury that you're no longer able to do some of that, but how do I stay active? What can my body do? And how can I continue to, again, I think like one of the things that I really loved about being an athlete was that like it brought up like, I know how to like work out and I can, I know how to lift weights and I can do all these things. And it sort of put in a mentality that has like allowed me to continue that throughout my life. And then I missed the community. And so I found my way back to a volleyball league, and have been on the same volleyball team for 20 years, and we're not that great. I mean, don't tell them, but like, I think I have like a higher level, but it's still super fun because all the people there are just like really great. We have such a great time. And so I had missed the community, that I had way back in high school. And so you sort of find your way back into some of those spaces again, I think is really nice. But anything else that you all think that comes up in your like conversations around like health and well-being in the athletic community that we should bring into the conversation, aside from resources, which we'll get to in a moment? Did we hit everything?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the issue of control that Schier brought up is huge, because I think a lot of times you're not even aware of that you're doing it. And then it will take like a major shake up to move you to this place where you could then think about, should I diversify my identity here, or what can I learn? So I have learned this phrase recently where it's learning to succeed, because a lot of competitive athletes or high-level academic students have the fear of failure, and reframing that over and over and over again, learning to succeed. Like athletes literally practice failure every single day in practice. Every single day they're practicing failure. But what are they doing? They're learning to succeed. And so I think thinking about that and how it relates to like trying to control everything, it's like not everything is going to go your way. So some of the benefits, going back to the benefits, because I feel like we're talking about how hard it is, and it is hard, but that transferable skill, like give me the most difficult thing in life, and guess what? I can lean back into what I learned from athletics, or I can lean back into my network that I have, because those people, like I still have my friends from 35 years ago at Seton Hall, or my friends from 40 years ago in high school, my high school team. And when I need something, who am I calling? That's who I'm calling.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think that's an important lesson for all of us, you know, because I think we all want to control things, right? Control is like a lot of like where anxiety comes from. And so it's like, oh, I have no control over everyone else, but how can I control me? And that's where a lot of like blame comes in. Like we're like, oh, I didn't do this right, so it's my fault. And we sort of take that in as like information. I'm going to then try to control everything else. And we need to like remember it. Like I like your, you know, phrase of like, you know, learning to succeed, but also in failure we learn so much, and like to take some of the stigma off the terminology of failure, because like failure is just like us gathering more information.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
like,
Feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like I learned that I can't do it this way. I have to do it this way. Right. Or I gained more information. So really just sort of shifting that too, that like failure really is just taking a step back, gathering more information, and this is how I'm going to move forward. So I think that I really like how we're sort of framing this for not just athletes, but for all of us in our day-to-day life, that like we can't control everything. We can control a certain amount, and then we can like learn from the things that, you know, come up that didn't feel like was our best. Yeah. Any other thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, like Michele said, I think the thing that's so scary about not having control and about failure is the fear that if the worst outcome happens that you're envisioning, you won't have the coping skills or the coping mechanisms to be able to deal with that. But athletes have practiced failure over and over, and they have dealt with that. So just leaning back on those coping skills that athletes have already built.
Yeah, and reminding yourself that those are coping skills that do transfer into other things. Yeah, because I think it is really good practice for, you know, day-to-day life. There's competition in the, you know, business world or in all these different like academic worlds that, you know, like you can bring up and sort of lean into how did I handle this as like an athlete? You know, it's very similar. So really, I like also, you know, something that was said earlier. I think Maddie, you sort of talked about the oh god, I just like lost my this is what happens like when you're old. Your brain just kind of drifts off but I think like when you think about, you know, validating someone, you know, it's like to validate yourself is also like just super important, to be able to say, oh, this is normal. It's normal that I'm struggling because I no longer have this identity, or it's normal that like I'm feeling really anxious about this game. And then to be able to like continue to like change the narrative, you know, like shift those words and those language moments where you can say, okay, well, even if this doesn't go well, I'm still going to be okay. I know how to cope. I'm going to push through this. I've lost before, and I know how to push through it if it happens, you know, again. Right. So I think that's really helpful. Yeah. So I think last but not least, I would love to hear if you guys have any like resources on or off campus. We've already sort of mentioned our counseling and wellness services. You mentioned a couple of things already as well, Michele, but I'm wondering if you might be able to share any other resources that we haven't mentioned so far that student athletes might be able to access.
So we try to get the message out there, make sure the student athletes know, one, about the well-being. Also, we try to lean into Wasserman a lot, because there's so much pressure. I mean, where does the academic pressure come from? It comes from that you want to get a job. Right. So the Wasserman, the Career Center, and we have a point of contact there to support the athletes. We also can lean into Office of Basic Needs. This is another thing that no one wants to talk about. People get really uncomfortable talking about, especially in an environment like NYU, and where there is a lot of privilege, and we can acknowledge that there are a lot of people at NYU with a lot of privilege, but there are also a lot of challenges at NYU. So the Office of Basic Needs, we also refer people to Mindful NYU. And then within Serenity, I already mentioned that we have Ari Miller, so we have sports performance consultant. We also have a nutrition consultant. We also now have refueling stations because some challenges for athletes with their time management, they can't keep up with their nutrition. So we have refueling stations where they can run in and get something quick.
And by that you mean food, right?
Yes, okay. Yes, food, yes.
Lifesaver.
Yeah. You can say more about it.
What are the options?
They have everything in there. Yeah. There's fruits, smoothies, coconut waters, milk, crackers, seaweed. There's everything that you could possibly
healthy.
It is, but it's like good. It's good stuff. And for us, we have 3-hour practices and then we go into lift. So it's very taxing. So most of the time we'll eat between, like we'll practice for our 3 hours and then eat at the refueling station, then lift in the VPC because they're connected. But also if you're going from practice straight to your class, because some of us have to leave practice a little bit early to get to a class, and you can just stop right there upstairs and grab that. And it fuels you, your body, but also fuels your mind and your brain, and you can perform so much better in your sports field or in the classroom. Like it's very beneficial. I feel like I've seen so much improvement in performance, both academically and athletically in myself, just having resources like that, because we would go like have class early in the morning, go straight to practice, and then go to another class and wouldn't eat the entire time because you just didn't really have time to, or you didn't know what you were feeling or something like that. But everything in there is so like they're power foods. They help you immediately, and it just helps you to feel a lot better. So yeah, I love the refueling station. I take too many snacks every time I'm there.
Well, it sounds like it also takes like the thought process out. Yes. Like you don't have to go through, what do I want to eat? Because that's my problem when it comes to eating. I'm like, what do I want? Do you have like just some options? And I think it also makes you feel cared about.
Yes.
It's like, someone thought in advance to like put this together, and so they realize the challenges that are coming up for athletes.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Other things on that list?
I think Schier, maybe you would have some reference to some.
Yeah, I'll do a plug for the mental health app that I've helped develop and work on. It's called Maya, Maya, and it's free in the App Store and on the Google Play Store. It's a cognitive behavior therapy skills app. So it's skills like to cope with difficult thoughts and behaviors, emotion monitoring tools, mindfulness, relaxation, things like that. And one of the main reasons we developed it is to overcome some of these barriers that we talked about. So like for athletes who feel like maybe going to a therapist is too scary or too much right now, or just don't have the time for it, it can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because I'm hearing all that y'all do. And so to try to like add in like a therapy appointment of 50 minutes or 45 minutes, like that can, be stressful too. Although we do have good services, but just to say that like it's good to have some alternatives. And so an app, might be a good way to like get some good skills in. We also have some good workshops that also do those things, not just Nina Matthews, like that she does with athletes, but we have like emotion regulation and some cognitive behavioral ones. So, but again, those are, things that you have to log into Zoom. So I appreciate that there's like an app that you don't have to like log in. You can do it on your own time when you do have time, maybe on the bus, in between things. So yeah, that's really helpful. Anything else? Any other resources that you have accessed? Or?
Well, I've mostly worked with Ari as well within athletics, and obviously we have mention of Nina as well. But not mental health professionals, but always open people are Mindy and Ryan in the OSAE. They're two of the best people I've ever met in my life, and they're so open to discussion and helping you in any way that they possibly can.
And who are they and what do they?
Oh, this is what I referenced before. Yeah. They're the academic support.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's Office of Student Athlete Excellence, but they provide the academic support and also leadership training.
Okay. Yes, and I was in their leadership program. I'm still in their leadership program. And have been since my freshman year, and they help not only with leadership parts, but they also form our absence letters that we give to our professors. Okay. And they make our life really easy. I can't lie. We just turn it into the professors, let them know what days we won't be there. They give us our work for that day, which helps with the academic portion we were talking about earlier, where you have to get your work maybe 3 or 4 days in advance. So not only are they really good with what they do, but also outside of what they do, just being outlets for student athletes in any sort of type of way that they can be. We are very close to them as the women's basketball team, but I'm sure they're just as close with every other team. So I would say that they're definitely great people to be outlets for sure.
I love that you have such, close relationships with the folks inside there.
Yeah, I love them.
Mm-hmm. And we have the student groups as well. We have one that's specifically mental health, which is the Hidden Opponent. It's a national organization. We have a chapter at NYU. We have student campus captains. So they have meetings, or they run de-stress events. So, which is meant, the organization is meant to destigmatize talking about mental health within athletics. So it's a community of students that can come together. So that's open to all student athletes. They can join that. And Serenity mentioned before Black. So we have, besides the Hidden Opponent and Black, we have 7 other student athlete groups that student athletes can join, which are student led. So they're peer groups where they can find community or support. Some of them are pre-professional groups, like when you were mentioning about students that are studying pre-med and how challenging it is in trying to balance that schedule. We have Violets in healthcare, which are all athletes who are studying any kind of healthcare profession, and then they get together to support one another. So we have these other groups, which I think are great that they're peer-led, because in my opinion, students don't really want to hear from their coach or the administrator. They want to be with their peers, with their friends.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get that too. But thank you all so much for being here and having this conversation with me. I kind of lived vicarious a little bit. I still had a good college experience, but still it reminded me of what it was like to be an athlete, and still am. But I hope that, this conversation is able to bring some light and some normalcy to others who might be finding some challenges in athletics, but also who really sort of lift it up, because I think it's a really good community to be part of. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have questions about the podcast or anything that we've talked about today, please feel free to email us at goodsex.podcast@nyu.edu. We monitor this inbox during business hours and usually reply within 3 to 4 days. Since we can't cover everything in one episode, there may be some things that we missed, got it wrong, or it landed the wrong way. If so, please feel free to let us know. You can also check out our show notes for links to organizations, articles, books, and videos mentioned in this episode. If you're an NYU student and have questions about your sexual health, you can connect with our Student Health Center Sexpert at sexpert@nyu.edu, or book an appointment through the Student Health Portal. If you have an urgent mental health concern, safety issues, or you are worried about someone that might have caused harm to you, or you might have caused harm to someone, then you can contact NYU's Confidential Wellness Exchange at 212-443-9999. Chat with them using their mobile app or email them at wellness.exchange@nyu.edu. For any non-NYU listeners, then you can call the National Hotline on Sexual Assault at 1-800-656-4673, or the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe for more Good Sex at NYU.